Yeah, no, I appreciate it, Michael. Uh, we have an exciting panel today on scholar activism. First of all, welcome to our Diversity Now series. I believe we are in our fifth or sixth installment. I can't remember the exact number it's been so far, but we started off with a conversation about Black male educators and how do we get more into the educational field. And then from there, we've talked about remote learning, equity and equality, accessibility, and now we're moving into scholar activism. So I'm happy today to be bracketed. For those of you that have been tapped in since the first webinar, that first webinar was 100% African-American males. And so I figured for our scholar activism panel, we would go the opposite direction and we would bring some powerful African-American women onto the platform and hear from them today. So I'm going to introduce each of them, all three of these ladies with us today. I'm happy to call my sisters. We work together and we have been in this scholar activism fight for some years now. So first, I want to introduce Patrice Hill, who is the director of Sacramento Area Youth Speaks out of University of California, Davis. We have Denisha Coco Blossom Bland, who is the associate director of Sacramento Area Youth Speaks out of UC Davis. And then we have Jacqueline Kendricks, who is the program director of after-school programs at the Roberts Family Development Center. Ladies, typically I start off with a question for our panelists, but if it's okay, would you all allow me to have a few minutes to kick this off, right? All right. Normally I wouldn't do this, but over the weekend, we had another unarmed black man get shot by police officers. And just as egregious as the George Floyd murder was, I think this one was just as egregious to see a black man in front of his babies get shot in his back without putting up any resistance. Again, I'm one of those individuals that like to say we don't know all the details of the event, but from the visuals, right? I seen a black man who was trying to get to his children, and as a result, we are thankful that he kept his life, but we are also disheartened by the fact that he was shot and that he may be paralyzed for the remainder of his life. And so, as I have been grappling with this situation, trying to bring some perspective to it for myself, but also to some of the young people that I get opportunity to interact with on a daily, weekly basis. I did what any good scholar activist does, and that is I started reading. First, I went to France Fanon, and I reread over the weekend Black Skin, White Mask, trying to understand what is this relationship that we have that is causing this to occur over and over and over again. But like usual, I ended up on our good friend, James Baldwin. And so I want to just read a quote from James Baldwin from his conversation titled A Talk with Teachers. And I want to just let you know there's some strong language in this quote that I'm going to read, but I think this quote is going to set us up to have a very good conversation to start off with. Baldwin writes, "In order for me to live, I decided very early that some mistake had been made somewhere. I was not a nigger, even though you called me one. But if I was a nigger in your eyes, there was something about you. There was something you needed. I had to realize when I was very young that I was none of those things I was told I was. I knew enough about life by this time to understand that whatever you invent, whatever you project, is you. So where we are now is that a whole country of people believe that I'm a nigger and I don't. and the battle's on. Because if I'm not what I've been told I am, then it means that you are not what you thought you were either. And that is the crisis. It's not really a Negro revolution. It's not really a Black Lives Matter revolution that is upsetting the country. What is upsetting the country is a sense of its own identity. If, for example, one managed to change the curriculum in all the schools so that Negroes learn more about themselves and their real contributions to this culture, you would be liberating not only Negroes, you'd be liberating white people who know nothing about their own history. And the reason is that if you are compelled to lie about one aspect of anybody's history, you must lie about it all. And so I start there because I really believe that scholar activism is about liberating children and giving them the tools to be able to push back against a system that wants to categorize them as niggers, right? Again, we are using strong language here, but part of this language that we're using is expressive of the indignation that we feel as a result of what we continue to see happening on our TV screens, on our phones every single day, right? And so how do we get to a place where not only do we recognize that the Black Lives Matter movement that is upsetting our country is really what Baldwin says, a sense of its own identity. The country is grappling with who it really is when it looks into the mirror. And so again, what better way to have this discussion than to have these three powerful women on with us today. And so I will start with our sisters from SES and ask this first question. How do you all define scholar activism in the work that you do?
How I define scholar activism in the work that I do is being a bridge between being a scholar and being essentially a community worker, a community activist. It means that my intention is scholarly, but my focus is to improve the community. That I'm rooted in my education on who I am, and I've used education as a tool to improve my life, but I'm still committed to the community that I come from, and my work is focused on making the community that I come from a better place. It means having one foot in the university, one foot in the community, working simultaneously to make both places a better, make them better. And I also feel that scholar activism is rooted in the fundamental belief that we can never change who we are, no matter how much education that we have. And we are privy, and we should have the fundamental belief that we need to go back to the communities that we come from to serve, and have the intention to use our education to improve who we are and the communities we serve.
First, excuse me, because my voice went out, but I could not let you down, brother. I'm like, I gotta be here, so I'm gonna be a little raspy. For me, though, my scholar activism is actually changing the university as much as it tried to change me. I am not your traditional scholar. I'm not one that you would have thought that maybe would have graduated from a top tier university. I'm not the person that looks like the traditional academic, but learning how to navigate that space, coming from a hood community, but keeping my authentic self, keeping my authentic roots of what I learned in my neighborhood, and navigating the academia system. I think that's in its own right, being an activist on campus, really speaking up for people who walk like me and talk like me, not only look like me, because you can have a lot of people that look like me, but the ones that walk like me and talk like me and navigate through this academia world, as well as, like Patrice said, going back to the community and showing other roses that we can also make it in the academia world. Because where I come from, academia is not considered the traditional way out. You know, you might think of drugs, basketball, football, rap, so forth. But to be someone from the streets and be like, nah, I graduated. You know, my way out was academia. That's scholar activism for me.
Jackie, I'll ask you the same question, but I know that with Roberts Family Development Center, you run the Freedom School program where a big emphasis is about helping kids understand that they can be the change that they seek. How would you define scholar activism?
That's very true about Roberts Family Development Center and Freedom Schools. And you know, to echo what the ladies have said, the need for education in our communities, and really to put an emphasis on understanding and embracing the educational opportunities that we have. Youth and activism encompasses community, and encompasses education, it encompasses youth. But it really starts with understanding that each one of us comes with a gift and a responsibility and a role in creating a bridge for those to come behind us, as well as ourselves. And specifically for us as an agency, and even just in myself, education is what we focus on, whether that be understanding the systems that you're in, whether that's understanding how to use your voice appropriately so that it can be heard within the system, understanding that maybe your role might be a support person, understanding that your role might be a staple provider, your role might be different, and that all of these components fit into learning how to utilize your voice in an effective manner to get people to listen, that it comes in so many different sizes and shapes and ways, that each one of our children specifically, and even our youth workers, contribute to changing the system. It's not always looking like one way, and we really emphasize reading, right? Because you need to be able to read your contract, you need to be able to read your signs, you need to be able to read the law, you need to be able to read instructions, you need to be able to read what's put in front of you and understand it. The only way you can do that is through education. And so for us, education is really the key to learning how to use your voice as young as 5, 6, right? Children have a voice, whether that voice is how they impact their family, how they impact their community, how they impact their world, how they impact themselves, with hope and education. That's our motto, right? Like every single one of the folks that we have the opportunity to touch impacts all of those areas, all of those 6 areas, as early as 5 and 6 as they can speak. So we start young in teaching youth how to use their voice at that young age. You know, oftentimes we talk about I statements, right? How to use I statements. I want, I need, I like, I don't like. And to use them effectively. So that's kind of what, you know, social youth activism is for me, is teaching children and young adults how to use their voice to impact the system through education specifically.
I'm glad you brought up reading, because one thing that is unique about both SES and RFDC is that both organizations focus heavily on literacy. What is the importance of literacy when it comes to developing scholar activists?
Well, you know, literacy is the basis of all democratic participation. If you can't read or write, you can't be civically engaged. So literacy is a basic human right. And we really feel like not only is it a foundation for civic engagement, but you can't really be academically successful if you don't know how to read or write. How can you navigate the other subjects if reading and writing are subjects that you have not necessarily mastered, but that you don't have a proficiency in? So it's so important for young people to be able to articulate their struggles and their voices and their wins. So that's why literacy is so important for us, because we really feel like if you cannot speak and write for yourself, then someone else is going to do it for you.
Right. You have to know how to read and write. I mean, that's just the basis of everything. Like, I can't, your name again, sister? Is it?
Me?
Yeah.
Jackie,
okay.
Jackie, yes.
Jackie,
Wait, me?
Yeah, how you gonna read your contracts? How you gonna read, the basis? How you gonna even know what money you have if you can't know what a 1 and a 2? And also, where I come from, they always used to say, if you didn't want a Black man to know something, you put it in a book, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, okay, if that statement is so powerful, we have to get in these books. And so that's why I really push it along with says that it's important to be able to read and write. And also too, writing is healing, right? You can't tell everybody everything, but if you have a journal and you write that thing out in that journal, you can also heal and track and document your own story. So that's why writing is so important.
You know, I agree with both of the ladies, you know, and then when you think about it from a historical content, right, that, you know, for African Americans specifically, slavery, education was what they used to keep us enslaved, right, to keep us absent from whatever process was happening. And then when you move forward progressively, right, and we get to the 60s, which is not truly that long ago, you know, African Americans were given the right to vote, right? However, if you couldn't read and you couldn't write and you couldn't pass that literacy test when you walked up to that voter booth, you then were not allowed to vote, right? And so your voice couldn't be heard. And so historically, education has been the tool that, let's just keep it 100 today, the oppressors have used to prevent us from participating in the system in which we have work to create and live in. And then as you move forward, right, and we move forward even into more times now, right, there's the prison to pipeline, right, that if you cannot read and write by the 3rd grade, you are ultimately tracked for prison, AKA you won't necessarily stay within the educational system. That is how traditionally prisons and jails are built, is, well, how many children can pass these standardized tests? And if you aren't aware, by 3rd grade, right, children begin to take those tests independently. Kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade, tests are not timed, tests are teacher-led, the tests are, you know, microphoned or read out loud, and they're kind of done in a group. When your child hits the 3rd grade, they now have to read those questions on their own, and they're now given a time frame. And immediately, just like that, life changes for them. They are now being standardized tested and tracked ultimately in the educational system about what the predictions are for their success. And so if we want to dismantle that system, we have to learn that system. If we can't read and we can't comprehend, we can't even be factors in dismantling or recreating or questioning the system that is supposed to serve us. But if we, again, kind of keep things 100, it was not designed to serve us in the first place. So reading is the only thing that will help you even understand the system in which you are in, right? So education, again, is the thing that oftentimes separates the haves from the have-nots, not just monetary things, but reading and writing.
Man, I'm writing down quotes in the chat box because I'm like, y'all laying some knowledge here today. I want to make sure folks is picking up what y'all putting down. I want to you know, track back a little bit to some of the comments that I made to start us off today, and preface it by saying, while 2020 has been challenging, there has been no better time for folks who work in the community with kids to bring out this scholar activism and this voice, right? Like, this has been a phenomenal opportunity for us to really work with kids and show them that they have a voice and that they have power. When it comes to the George Floyds and the Jacob Blakes and everything that's happening, what has been your message to the youth that you work with? How have you been guiding them, advising them, mentoring them when it comes to helping them find and express their voice in this moment?
I'm gonna jump in, ladies. It's been tough, right? It's been tough because they are everyday situations that any of us could have found ourselves in. They are unexplainable tragedies. They are things that have happened really for no rhyme or reason in your mind. And so for us, we have kind of been an ear. We've really turned to the arts. So we've turned to some of the tools that the ladies at SAYS really use, the spoken word, the journaling. It's tough to come together in this time. So we've pulled small groups of youth together, trying to find that joy, and then being really honest with them, like, you stand on my shoulders, So reminding ourselves that we are a continual role model about how you carry yourself in these times, how you use your voice in these times, how can you peacefully protest? Maybe there's a time that some of you aren't peacefully protesting. Understand what the consequences are to those protesters. Again, some of it falls back to education, and something that I said earlier, every single one of us has a role in the fight, right? Every single role of us has a role in the movement. And so helping children find what that role is, if that's being the voice with their families, if that's encouraging voting. We really kind of hunkered down in voter registration, that this is a time to encourage your family members to vote to change your future, right? Because your family has to change your future in voting. They don't have a true voice. So we've really kind of tried to inspire and to create ways for children to express themselves, because the confusion has got to be, I'm an adult and I'm confused, so I can't imagine what children are feeling.
Definitely agree with you 100%, Jackie. I think that because SAYS is rooted already in a space where we really push young people to speak for themselves and be the authors of their own lives, we really relied on our artistry to carry us through this time. We are fortunate to have a large group of young people that we worked with in the Sacramento area who've really grown up in the program and have really found their own voice and have found their activism and have found their passion. So we had a lot of our young people on the front lines of protests all throughout this movement, really just trying to be supportive for them. And as well as, the young people we worked with in schools, this is a very, very trying time. This is not an easy time for young people to be engaged in school. And the virtual learning and the distance learning that's been taking place has not given a lot of room for us to really engage with young people around current events like we need to, and like they need to dissect this. So we've done a lot of organic communicating over social media, over phone, over text. We have done some home visits and some small groups of young people, but we've also just relied heavily on our artistry to carry us through. We really believe that there is no protest without poetry. So curating virtual events, curating artistic spaces where young people can still come and speak their truth, that's really been our go-to.
I think in this time too, I'm sorry, Denise, you didn't unmute fast enough, girl. It's been partnership with community partners, right? Being in spaces with like-minded people. I think here in Sacramento, while we may be small, we are mighty. Like the organizations that are linked together, that are like-minded about serving the community, we come together really well in times of need. And, the neighborhood divides don't divide the partnerships between community partners. And so for us, knowing that there are partners like SAYS and some other organizations that we can say, you guys need to tap in over here. You're awesome, huh? These are places that you can go. Knowing where you can send children has been really important too.
Like Jackie said, knowing where you can send children, reaching out, keeping our ears to other programs that's doing things, because, during this COVID, it is hard. But like Patrice said, a lot of our youth have been on the front lines for so many years for the same cause. I noticed that a lot of them have kind of took a step back this time around. They really, they like, man, what is this really finna do? I see youth getting tired of it. I know like right now, Sacramento's pretty quiet for what just happened to the guy that was just shot. Sacramento is very quiet, and I noticed that. Usually we'll be in an uproar, looting when George Floyd hit, but I noticed that. So I don't know if the youth are getting tired of seeing it too. They just want action. They just want change. But as Patrice said, we just always come back to the poetry. If you got something to say something. And so we just trying to make sure we got journals out and make sure we keeping our youth rooted in their artistry.
All three of you work in the community. Your roots are community based, even though you have, like Patrice said, 1 foot in the academic system as well. But it's a lot easier to implement scholar activism in the community. It's a lot easier to do it from that side of the house. How do you work with schools and school districts to implement the scholar activism piece throughout the like regular school day, right? So that it's not just the after school or ancillary type deal, but that it becomes a part of the mainstream curriculum as well.
That really takes a fundamental belief from the administration that your work is valued and that this is something that the young people at the school need, because we do have those models, right? For instance, Luther Burbank High School, the SAYS Project Hill program, is accredited elective class. It's in its 4th year of programming. We're on the master schedule where we have 2 periods during the school day. That really took us going to the school and saying, what do you need? And they had to be authentic and real with us and say, we need help with our Black female students. There are not a lot of administrators or folks in key positions that are willing to be vulnerable enough with the community and with the school districts to say, hey, we got this problem and we can't handle it because we're not equipped. That takes a lot of honesty. That takes a lot of transparency. However, what we have seen through these partnerships where this type of model of scholar activism that's rooted in developing culturally relevant curriculum for students that really have not been afforded the opportunity to learn about themselves in any part of school, it's really telling that this changes the lives and the trajectory of young people to go to a class and learn about yourself, learn about social justice, the Black Panther Party, Assata Shakur. We dissecting Tupac lyrics. We understanding institutionalized racism and systems of oppression, gentrification, the liberation movement. Like, these should not be foreign concepts. It shouldn't be a foreign concept for you to be a Black person in a city and go to a school where there's hundreds of other Black students and you are not rooted and centered in the curriculum. These aren't new ideas. I just think that we don't have the tools to really expand it like we need to. However, thank God there are administrators that really believe in the work and really believe in the outcomes for especially Black students, really having a curriculum that is rooted in Blackness and dispels myths of anti-Blackness and really can incorporate into the culture what it means to be rooted in safe student spaces and culturally relevant curriculum really changes the culture of a school. And I don't want to speak too much. However, in 1 year of programming with Coco and I using culturally relevant curriculum that was centered in Blackness and centered in social justice, you had in a class full of Black women, you had suspensions decreased by 50%. You had attendance decreased by 43%, and you had behavior infractions decreased by 58%. Because of culturally relevant curriculum, that's how important it is to learn about yourself and see yourself positively reflected in the curriculum. That can change your whole trajectory, not just in school, but in life.
I just want to say this real quick. I know but I like that you had those statistics ready to give us off the top of your head about the impact of the program. But I also feel like the fact that we have to have the statistics ready off the top of our head to talk about the impact of our program is a fundamental flaw in us being able to do the work that we know how to do, right? It's not just that we are doing the work and being effective at it, but it's always someone who wants to see, well, what are the numbers? Because it's not good enough to be able to say that our babies are feeling more empowered, their esteem is increased, they are more interested in learning and finding their voice, right? Is always someone who's like, everything you talking about qualitatively means nothing to me without the quantitative statistics to go with it. And so I appreciate you having those statistics, but I just wanted to point out that sometimes it gets tiring having to prove over and over and over and over again that the work, that this type of work is actually impactful on children's lives without having to like pull a number out of somewhere.
Yeah, but I think she got used to it because, you know, when it's time to go chase that money to help the program to keep going, they be like, what's the numbers? Even UC Davis, what y'all doing? What's the numbers? But it would be great, though, if we can just go off our youth stories, our youth testimonies. That would be dope, brother. But like P said, what says it's all in our curriculum. That's how we root in the activism.
We have to track the same things, right? And it's unfortunate, like I made a note to myself, because not only do you have to have the statistics, but the statistics are not rooted in the children's strengths, right? They're rooted in the educational system's values, right? Are they being sent to the principal's office less often? Are they attending school more often? They're not tracking, like, are they feeling better about themselves? Are they coming to school with their face washed? Are they looking you in the eye and, you know, feeling confident in their answer, even if their answer is in disagreement? Are they able to do that in a manner that you can hear? They're tracking less suspensions. They're tracking being in class on time. They're tracking the things that make their system better, right? They're not tracking the things that make our children's lives better, or the value or the quality of life that our children are living any better, which is unfortunate, because that's why we're all in it, right? Is to create opportunities for the value and the quality of life that our children live, not just the boxes that can be checked in someone else's system. It's just terrible, because we have to track the same things, because those are the things that others say that make our program valuable. I think that, Patrice, you said something also, I didn't write it down because now it's gone, that's how my mind works. But you were talking about being able to be in those classrooms and show the historical relevance and studying Tupac lyrics. I think, you know, we do some of those same activities. We do it a little different because we focus on those historical kind of contexts, like voter registration and why you want to go why voter registration is important. And we kind of track back about, you know, having to take that test, having to do that. We kind of look at some different things in history, the civil rights movement. And that tends to be simply because our pay is a little different, given that we're after school programs. And so we're directly doing the after school content, which is, you know, being able to educate the whole child. We also look at lyrics, right? We also look at modern music. Music is a big movement. We also have had to tap into social media, how you utilize social media, the things and the content that come up on social media, how children, the choices they make on what they post. All of those things become content that we use on a regular basis to help children shape and form their thoughts and ideas about how they want to show themselves in the community.
I have another question for you all about your staff, but before we get to that question, John Sanders asked in our chat, would you say that literacy and culturally responsive curriculum are directly connected?
Yeah, I would say that they are. I would say that in order to give young people of color opportunities to become more literate, you have to have culturally responsive curriculum that is engaging and makes them want to read and makes them want to learn it. I'm going to be way better equipped to teach The Coldest Winter Ever versus To Kill a Mockingbird. I have to have curriculum that speaks to my existence and authenticates who I am and my lived experience in this world. It's really hard to teach curriculum that's outdated and that doesn't include the children who are being asked to read it. So I would say, yes, they're definitely connected. I just would say that literacy is a core component of learning. You have to have literacy to learn all subjects. And it's also, how can you be civically engaged if you cannot read? So I'll let my colleagues elaborate if they want to elaborate on that.
I believe they're connected, just like you said, not even teach, but to learn, right? One of my brothers sent me something the other day. He was teaching his daughter, it was life science, and it had all lovely white people with all these great positions, you know, and it had one black man sitting on the floor like this, looking up, reading to the white man, and the white man was reading to him, right? When you see that as a kid and you myself as a slave, still today in 2020 curriculum for life science, what does that tell a Black kid in their mind, right? How can they even be happy about reading this assignment when all the doctors, all the teachers, and everybody on this picture does not look like them? So cultural curriculum, it is highly connected to literacy and how you're gonna be able to learn and see yourself in academics and as a scholar later. If you don't, you'll see yourself as a scholar, you know, in your own traditional learning. So I believe that.
Yeah, I would agree with both of the ladies. We do freedom schools, right? And so in freedom schools, it is a literacy program. It is a 6-week summer school that is immersed in literacy, that engages children from kindergarten all the way through high school in reading. And children are reading either a book a day in the elementary ages or a chapter book a week in the middle school through high school phases. Every single book is about the African American experience, the Native American experience, the Indian experience, the low income experience, and features and is primarily focused around people of color. So every single book is about us. Every single picture in a book is about us. Every single story is a story that somebody you know in your family, in your community experiences. The place I'm gonna go is Common Core, right? Because Common Core is teaching you to think through problems and situations. And those problems and situations really don't differ in the real world, but if I don't understand the example or the context, then I can't really tell you what I think. And culturally relevant curriculum allows our children to be in experiences that are familiar to them, that they can then visualize, that they can then understand and think through just like everybody else. Being able to look at the pictures in the book and see a family experiencing homelessness, in a book, and a family that has to live in their car and how they get treated at school and how they don't have lights to read at night and that they have to do their schoolwork in the daytime, and how do they wash and how do people treat them? Then when you come back around and you're asking children questions like, so have you ever been in a situation where you had a time when you had to adjust your schedule to accommodate somebody else's, something else that was happening? Children begin to answer the question quickly. Yeah, I had this happen in my life. Oh yeah, I had this happen. And the solution and the peer-to-peer engagement and the peer-to-peer learning starts to happen, because now we're not talking about something that I'm embarrassed about or you're picking on me about or I'm ashamed about, but we're talking about a common theme that everybody begins to be able to understand and conceptualize. And then the Common Core curriculum becomes adaptable to our communities.
And I'll just add, y'all have already knocked the question out the park, but I'll just add this from Fanon. Fanon says, all colonized people position themselves in relation to the civilizing language. The more the colonized has assimilated the cultural values of the metropolis, the more he will have escaped the bush. The more he rejects his blackness and the bush, the whiter he will become. And so I think that we sometimes forget the connection between language and culture, right? And if you're talking about literacy, right, you're talking about having access to language. And we spend a lot of time teaching our children how to access language that is not culturally relevant to them. And by default, they begin to reject their own identities. That's why Patrice was talking about earlier, like, we're teaching our kids to go get educated and come back, right? But in order to do that, you have to make that connection between the education that they're going to receive in the university, in the academy, and the education that they've already received at home, right? So that connection between literacy and cultural responsiveness has to be there, because they have to be able to access not only language that is foreign to them, i.e. language of the academy, but they have to be able to access the language of their own home cultures as well. And so Just wanted to add that on. I think this may be one of our last questions, but one of the things that I think is so unique about the work that you all are doing is that we have focused the majority of this conversation on the babies. And by babies, I mean K through 12, right? But both of your organization have just as much of an impact on creating scholar activists at the employee level. Both organizations take young people ages 18 to, I say, 25, 26, and you all give them a crash course, right, in scholar activism in a way that I've seen transform their lives. SES has the PME retreats that you all do, where you're giving them a lot of activist scholarship that I've seen young folks come out of that and just mind blown and like, I will never be the same again, right? Roberts Family Development Center attends the Freedom School training. And I've seen young people go to the farm, the Alex Haley Farm in Tennessee, and come back and just mind completely blown. Could you all speak to the power of scholar activism, not for the babies, but for the young adult, that 18 to 24, how it has impacted them?
I'm going to start that with my story and then go to our actual staff. When I first joined SES, I joined as a poet mentor educator. I was just a poet, not really into school, had a few little college credits. But when I went through our cohort training, which was a 6 weeks training at UC Davis to learn about social justice and scholar activism, it changed my life and my trajectory. And that's how I'm actually here on this panel today. So to actually go through that cohort and now to be coming back and teaching that cohort and seeing other youth and interns go through and go out to do their activism is amazing. And it's amazing. It's also healing for yourself, to see other people go through and find their self, especially with our internship program. We find undergrads that they don't know what they want to do. They don't know what they want to go. And to see someone find their self and come into their own, it's just a blessing from the program. And it's also a blessing for myself. So I think that that's the best part about SES is the teaching artists and the poet mentor educators, and being a community-based educator and coming back and learning that. That's the dopest part. But I'll let Patrice come in.
No, I mean, I completely agree. And, we were all in essentially a cohort together, myself, Ijoma, and Denisha, and that really showed us the power of being able to manifest into a scholar activist, right? I think the same tools that we teach young people to be authors of their own lives, agents of change, scholar activists, is the same tools that we use with folks at the employee level, right? In order to do this work, you have to embody what it means to really, truly do the work. If you cannot engage in scholar activism, social justice work is life work. It's really hard to turn it off. So if I can teach you as my employee how to manifest scholar activism in your day-to-day operations, I'm teaching you a skill set that you're going to be able to take far beyond my organization. You're going to be able to manifest change within yourself. You're going to be able to do what you see fit in this work or beyond. So I think that it's important to understand that we're not only educating young people, we're correcting the miseducation that folks have got for years and are out in the world, in the workforce, still learning and still needing professional development. SES really gave us tools to manifest ourselves not only as scholars, but as community educators. And so how do we take that same thing, those same tools back to our community? It's the same concept, right?
Right.
And let me, before Jackie, you jump in, let me just piggyback on what you all have said, because like Coco, given my own personal experience, I remember that first cohort and we had a lot of angry people in our cohort, like folks who understood the injustices of our society, but did not know how to, in a scholarly fashion, break down those injustices and then articulate the things that they found wrong with their community, with their city, with their world, right? And so it was just anger. It was just like I just want to, almost like we see now, right? I just want to destroy something. I just want to break something. And that something could be my own life, right? We had a lot of folks in our cohort that were self-destructing because they had not had the tools to liberate their minds. And so it was amazing to not only sit back and see other young Black men, young Latinas, young Latinos, young Black women, like have their minds liberate, and like day by day by day have these aha moments, like, aha, I do have a voice, and aha, I can actually think, and aha, I'm able to read like college level writings and dissect it and have an opinion and have that opinion be valued. I think the other aspect of it for me personally is I would not be doctor today if it wasn't for the scholar activism that was introduced to me when I was a part of SES, right? Because SES was the first time that someone looked at me and all of my, crazy consciousness and said, hey, brother, you a scholar. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, scholar, I've been called a lot of things in my life, but I ain't never been called a scholar, right? And so the activist part, I think, for our children and for our community is a lot easier to obtain because we've seen Black activists, right? We've seen Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and the Black Panthers and so forth and so on. It's the scholar identity. It's the scholar title that's a lot harder for us to grasp because we don't know many people who have been identified as scholars in our community. So for somebody to look at me and
right
say,
there real quick, brother, can I come
yeah, go ahead.
for you? Not to even know what the word is. I didn't even know what a scholar was till I got to SES. You know what I'm saying? Like, we not called scholars in school. We not, you don't even, and the words seem so simple, right? But the meaning is so depth. And so I just want to throw that in, brother. Like, we was learning language. Like, I didn't, social justice, what? Oh, I could be a teaching artist, so just as well as learning language through those cohorts. So I just wanted to kind of jump in, brother, because we was there together.
No, you're exactly right? Like, even identifying and learning what is a scholar, and oh, you mean I could be, and that's one of the powerful things about the Freedom School program is that not only do we call our youth scholars, right? Like, we don't call them students, we call them scholars. We're giving them that identity young. But for our older staff, right, we call them servant leaders, right? There's power in that title of saying you are a servant before you are a leader, right? But just because you're a servant does not necessarily mean that you're not a leader. So, Jackie, what were your thoughts on that question? You got to unmute yourself.
Sorry. I've been taking notes feverishly over here. I think, the thing about freedom schools that is so empowering is, one thing that you learn, and me being a 29-year-old and having gone to freedom schools, right? That you, every changing movement that has happened, especially in the civil rights movements, is on the backs of college students, right? It's on the backs of those 18 to 24. It's not the 35 to 50 who are really impacting change, right? And part of that is understanding that some kind of awakening happens between that 18 of 24, especially when you're in college, right? Because you start, some of the myths and the untruths about us as a culture, as a people, begin to be revealed to you. And traditionally, when we went to school, we went to historically Black colleges. So the education was about us, by us, through us. And so you know, that 18 to 24 in the South and Atlanta and Spelman and at Morehouse and Tuskegee and all of those schools, they began to dispel the myths of what we could do and couldn't do. And so traditionally, the movement focused on that, you know, was led by that 18 to 24. And so part of freedom schools and participating in freedom schools is still that commitment to awakening those 18 to 24-year-olds, right? And we do that by hiring specifically college students to be our servant leader interns, students that are in the midst of discovering themselves and where they belong and who they are connected to. And then we take them to the South, we take them to Tennessee, and we immerse them in this rich culture of historic movement, of the movement of people, African-American people. And in that they learn about, we spend some time on the plantation. The Alex Haley farm is actually the plantation that Alex Haley's family was on. He purchased it and then he restored it. And now it's like a lodge, but all of the buildings are the same. So you see the slave quarters. You know, we travel on a bus with no air conditioning in the heat, in the humidity. We are sitting in underneath tents, you know, and we're sweating and you're uncomfortable and you dare not complain, because in that moment you look around and you see the slave quarters and you see the struggle, and you're learning about historic women and men who have created opportunities for us to even be able to choose to get on an airplane, right? To choose to participate. And you realize in that moment that you belong just by virtue of the color of your skin to something greater than yourself. And then the responsibility that comes along with that is that you now have the privilege to serve these children who are coming up, and we're going to call them scholars. And everything that we do is intentional. It's down to the motivational song and Harambe that we do in the morning, which is a pep rally based on a Swahili word that means to pull together, right? And Harambe, anybody that does Harambe, like, you get hyped. You can't help but get hyped. And it's full of affirmations for children. We sing a motivational song that's called Something Inside So Strong. And it talks about the thing inside of you that no one can diminish, that you get to follow, and that you get to do who you are and be who you are, and that you can do anything that you set your mind to. And to watch the 18 to 24-year-olds tear up as they hear this song over a 7-day, 12-hour training where you're tired and you're mentally drained. And by day 3, you've got adults, you know, young adults crying because nobody's ever told them that something inside of them so strong was for them. Or they've never been in an environment where they've been required to tell their story as they participate in the educational process, right? As they sit in a circle and they look into their peers' eyes and they're talking about the stories that they're reading that the kids are going to read. We literally are learning to break generational curses in our community, and then at the same time build up the servant leader intern for them to walk away like, I impacted these kids. I helped put a little piece of healing in these kids. There are thousands of people around this community, in this world, this country, that I'm tied to, that are my friends, that are my peers, that think like me, that understand me, that see me, that embrace me, that love me, that embody me. They walk away with so much understanding and rich, you know, experience, heart-to-heart experience, that you see people that are like, oh, I'm a chemistry major. At the end of freedom schools, they're like, I'm going to be a teacher. I'm switching my major, and I'm gonna go and be a teacher, because it's important for these kids to see somebody that looks like them teaching them. Or they have these experiences with kids where kids break down and they're like, nobody's ever told me that I was important. Nobody's ever told me that I was valuable. Nobody's ever asked me, hey, did you eat today? Nobody's ever made sure, you know, and told me that I was important and told me that I was valuable. And our team, our SLIs, literally are the ones that leave at the end of the day drained and exhausted, in tears, crying, because they begin to have those experiences to see when you serve how much you impact, right? When you come from a space of service and servitude, that's the hugest thing that you can provide children. And so just the experience of really being tied to the movement and understanding that every single one of us has a role, even for myself, literally not being 29, y'all, but, you know, being a little bit more mature, going to Tennessee and understanding what my role was, right? That my role was to create a way for servant leader interns to find themselves, to understand the process, to begin to understand how important they are in impacting the youth, how their voice is important, how they're learning, because when they leave Roberts Family Development Center, they're going to go be teachers. They're going to go be administrators. They're going to go be city workers. And they're going to go in those spaces with an unapologetically African-American mindset about, you're going to hear me, you're going to see me, and you're going to value me as an equal. And that, to me, you know, it's for all of us. You know, we all walk away from these experiences that we have with a better understanding of what our gifts are and how we use those gifts to impact and change our communities and our systems and our families. Because the hurt and the dismantle and the brokenness, it's in all of those areas in our communities, in our lives, in our families. And so, you know, Freedom Schools kind of helps for me to awaken that, not only for our children, but that 18 to 24, where you're like, who am I? Where am I going? What am I going to do? Who do I want to be? Is there something bigger than just getting that quan in my pocket? Is there something more than just being self-centered and focused on me? You know, what about the rest? What about the community? What about my responsibility? Who's standing on my shoulders? And I think for Freedom Schools, you walk away with all of those questions answered.
So we have 4 minutes left. Is it Yashar? I hope I'm not saying it wrong, but I probably am. He has an awesome question that we don't have enough time to answer, but he asks, when it comes to African American vernacular English, aka Ebonics, right? What role does this play in literacy and learning about Black culture in school, receiving a Black education? Then he says, as a youth, I am often told using this language is bad and a sign of ignorance, which I feel is rooted in white supremacy. How can we manage our own culture, language, while learning the language of the oppressors and traditional curriculum taught in schools? How can we acknowledge this is history and complexity? Again, that is such a challenging question for me to find with 3 minutes to go.
That's a deep question, but it's
right.
A good
it's like
yeah.
It came from a youth, right?
It came from a youth, and what I would say to that youth is, one, stay on after 4:30, and we may be able to answer that question for you, because I think it's extremely powerful.
Right.
But two, don't ever let anyone tell you that your language is ignorant. Right? Because it's not. Your language is not ignorant. And the fact that you are able to speak multiple dialects of English, right, really shows how brilliant you are. And so, again, stay back, and we'll do that. I want to say a quick joke.
I just want to say one thing to him. All you're doing is adding to your language.
Right.
To the language you know. Adding to it and get through this academia stuff, then you write that book and you use your language, you know, for those babies that speak like you and talk like you. I went all the way through UC Davis and I never changed my talk, you know what I'm saying? You see, I'm still saying, you know what I'm saying? So you just add into your language, baby. You just add. I
would say you spend enough time around me, you will see that I use.
all of us, right?
Yeah.
All of us. I know I'm, Davis grads, they enhance you. You don't change. It's about enhancing. It's a bridge, right? Those words, you now can communicate with more than just one person. You have an extra tool that everybody else don't have. That's a valuable tool, right? Don't code switch, right? You got to know when and where to use it, how to use it. Don't lose you in the process of becoming great.
Right.
I didn't gave
him. It's not a crime to be who you are.
I didn't gave y'all the question. Y'all didn't answer it anyway. All right. Real quick, I want to thank our panelists, Patrice Hill, Denisha Bland, Jacqueline Kendricks, for participating. Quick story, and I promise I could tell this in the next 60 seconds. This is when I knew that I was a scholar activist. We were on a trip, I believe, to Vegas. And I mean, y'all know what happens in Vegas, stay in Vegas. But we was turning up, and I want to say we was either in the middle of the club or right after the club. We was talking about lesson plans for Monday. It was like Saturday, and some song had came on. We was like, we gonna turn this into a workshop.
We was in VIP. And we was talking about workshops.
And we all kind of looked at each other for a moment and we said, why are we in the club writing lesson plans for Monday, right? That's the moment I knew that I was a scholar activist, when it became fun for me to think about how to educate our babies, right? And so that's a memory that I will always take with me for the rest of my life. And I will tell you, to this day, we can't get together and have a function without thinking about how do we educate our babies. We spend more time on that than anything else. So, ladies, thank you.
Better than creating warrior scholars.
Yes.
Nothing better than creating.
We appreciate you all. If y'all like this one, please, we're going to have the video up soon. Please let your friends, your colleagues, your family members know that this was a good conversation, so that they can tap into the YouTube and watch the video. And then we're coming back next week. Oh, yes, I do. Next week, we're talking about schooling during a crisis, pandemic pedagogy beyond the triage. So if you want to, if you like this series, tap in next week, schooling during the crisis, pandemic pedagogy beyond the triage. Again, Patrice, Denisha, Jacqueline, thank you all. And you all have a good day.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ijoma, Dr. Ananuju. Appreciate you.
Yes. Thank you for having us. It was a pleasure.